are back with their new studio album, Invincible Shield. So let's take a look at what is inside the band's 19th studio record, discuss how Judas Priest tricked their fans on it, and then answer a popular question whether it still sounds like real Judas Priest and whether this band is even still relevant today. Here you go. The album opens with a very 80s sounding synth and guitar intro to Panic Attack, the first single to the album, which we all heard right after the band's announcement of Invincible Shield at last year's massive power trip. Overall, Panic Attack, and especially its intro, is a song which perfectly characterizes this album as a whole. When I first heard those old school 80s synths, I was absolutely speechless. I simply did not know what to think and what to expect next. This did not sound like anything I think Judas Priest would do in the 21st century. And that is exactly the purpose of that intro, which then gets intertwined with powerful guitar riffs, slowly building up into a vigorous, high-speed banger, which combines in itself the different eras of the Judas Priest sound, just like Invincible Shield as a whole does. This album is something you least expect from a band at its 55th year of existence. Just like the opening track, it makes you raise your eyebrows by combining both some of the most emotional and touchy songs Judas Priest have ever written in their career, possibly the most aggressive tracks the band has written since Painkiller. And talking about that, in terms of the song's composition, Panic Attack, just like many other tracks on the album, is this good old classic Judas Priest. Its structure is very similar to that of Painkiller, with a short and straight-to-the-point chorus, an insane lengthy main solo, and a sudden burst of energy towards the end of the song with an unexpected second guitar solo, which in a way creates this connection between the band's back catalog and Invincible Shield for all of the Judas Priest fans. By the way, at 1 minute and 17 seconds, Panic Attack actually features the longest album intro, not counting Nostradamus for obvious reasons, in the entire Judas Priest discography to date. And yet, by all means, neither it nor the song itself are overstretched at all. Quite the opposite, it perfectly builds up the momentum for what is to come and helps the band to keep you on your toes in anticipation of an absolutely insane ride Judas Priest will take you on the first half of the record. When Judas Priest released Panic Attack, I immediately assumed it would be the album's opening track, because that's what you usually want to do, and especially as a legacy band. Plays a high-paced banger right at the beginning of the album to raise the energy level up and show everyone that you still got it. But then a normal thing for most would be to slow down right away and place a more reflective song after it. But instead, as the album unfolds, Judas Priest are raising the energy level even more. Their fourth single, Serpent and the King. This song is possibly one of, if not the most aggressive and sharp sounding one on the album, which with its piercing energy comes as a reckless yet mature distant relative of Screaming for Vengeance or Free Will Burning, once again capturing the essence of the early 80s Judas Priest sound and reimagining it in 2024. Yet, interestingly enough, at only 4 minutes and 19 seconds, it is actually not the shortest song on the album. By far, which kind of shows that as they do not have to prove anything to anyone anymore on Invincible Shield, Judas Priest will somewhat go against the grain of modern metal tendencies, including those of an average song length, and release a no-compromise album packed with short and straight-to-the-point killers, a practice from the 80s they kind of returned to on their previous studio album, Firepower. Then comes the title track to Invincible Shield. And this is when, after elevating you with two skull-crushing bangers right at the beginning of the album, Judas Priest rip your head off. Invincible Shield opens with an energetic riff, which on one hand is done in the vein of its predecessor, yet at the same time has an extra twist to it. And together with a machine gun-like drum intro by Scott Travis, creates a feeling of an unstoppable force, which no matter how much they try, cannot be withheld by anything or anyone. And despite Invincible Shield featuring some classic Priest guitar work, a special praise here of course has to be given to Ian Hill and Scott Travis, whose rhythm section is responsible for this battle-like atmosphere created by this track. And while in its verse, the song once again mixes this early 80s style Judas Priest with their newer sound, just like Serpent and the King did. By the time we get to the verse, the boys somewhat take us back in time to their first albums, as the pre-chorus is modeled in a very similar way to, let's say, Sinner, or even more so possibly the legendary Exciter, with its mesmerizing ascending melody. But the part which grabs you the most is in fact its chorus, which is both aggressive and melodic, and with having just a right amount of epicness in it, I believe is simply impossible to not sing along to right from the first listen. And I honestly cannot even imagine how larger than life it will sound like live, with thousands of heavy metal maniacs declaring that they are united and nothing will stand in their way. And yes, this future Priest tour looks like will be yet another one which I'll be sadly missing because of Putin's mad ambitions and his insane army of works. Which is even more so painful given this song's lyrics resonate with me so much during these crazy times.
And nothing can stand in our way. Invincible Shield.
Despite Invincible Shield being the longest track on the record, it actually does not feel so at all. And partially thanks to several modulations done by the boys in its middle section, right after its culmination, which goes into a dueling guitar solo, on which Richie Faulkner actually does not play it safe, with a rather unexpected second part of it. And although taking a spotlight for almost 1.5 minutes, every note on it does not feel out of place, and helps complementing the main theme running through the entire song. With 6.5 minutes of running time, Invincible Shield is actually able to achieve something which most modern metal songs cannot do. It makes you wish it wouldn't end so soon and makes you long for more. And you know how much of a Judas Priest fan I am, so what I am about to say is in fact a very thoroughly thought through message. But in my opinion, this one, despite being somewhat straightforward in quite a lot of aspects of it, is possibly the strongest and definitely the catchiest song Judas Priest have written in over 30 years. On Devil in Disguise, Judas Priest finally decrease their BPM a bit, allowing a listener to finally catch a breath after a wild start of the record. Devil in Disguise somehow creates its own mood and groove, with its bluesy guitar riff and once again an extremely catchy chorus, which, thanks to its simplicity, is very easy to remember and thus will definitely get stuck in your head for hours to come. And just like most other songs on the album, it's most definitely written to be best enjoyed live.
Mischievous, a twinkle in his eye.
Overall, with this song, Priest somewhat open a second part of the record. A part which has this classic hard rock and arena-style heavy metal feel to it, which the band will continue developing on the following several songs.
He's the devil in disguise.
Gates of Hell continues the theme started on the previous track with a brilliant melodic guitar riff, cranking the epicness of this anthemic 80s style heavy metal track to 11.
These go to 11.
This is one of those songs that you really shouldn't play while driving on the open road somewhere in the middle of nowhere, unless you really want to pay a speeding ticket. For just as the title track, its melodic chorus is both inspiring and elevating, and for some reason I actually have this feeling that it would fit quite well on Point of Entry if the band would have decided to reimagine it in 2024.
We could scream in through the gates of hell. We could fight
Rock and Roll Highway anthem closes the first half of the album. And so, as always on our reviews, thus would be a good time to make the first conclusions about Invincible Shield. So let's do it. Invincible Shield is the album of many shades and forms, and the ones we heard so far are only a part of it. Since, run a little bit ahead of myself, there will once again be several unexpected directions Judas Priest will take us in later on the record. And yet the most striking thing of all is just how much energy, vigor and power the veterans of heavy metal, the guys who co-founded this genre, still have today. When at this point in their career, they do not have to prove anything to anyone anymore, and especially on those first 3 opening songs. And while with this energy and aggression, Judas Priest somewhat take us back to Screaming for Vengeance and Defenders of the Faith era, Invincible Shield does not really try to replicate its success, but instead just shows the most aggressive side of the band's sound today in 2024, which opens up thanks to, in my opinion, spotless production done by Andy Sneap, whom, for the record, after all these years, I would absolutely not mind seeing in any of the official music videos. Since, come on, by now Andy's pretty much a part of the Judas Priest family. And by the way guys, talking about family, and especially since we're having a little break here, I just want to once again thank you all, and especially thank my patrons and everyone who's purchased some Metal Pilgrim merch. Oh wait, 1 second. Yeah, everyone who's purchased some Metal Pilgrim merch to support this show. Guys, just know that it means the world to me, and it is thanks to you guys and thanks to everyone who's watching all my videos until the very end that I'm actually able to produce all of these episodes about all of our favorite heavy metal bands and keep the heavy metal fire burning. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Alright, the break is over. Let's continue. The second half of the album opens with Crown of Horns, possibly the most divisive of the 4 singles released by the band, and which many fans are still arguing online about whether it is actually a power ballad or not. Now, those who've seen my rather long review of this track know that despite it, in my opinion, being a rather surprising choice for a single, I absolutely loved Crown of Horns. In my recent interview with Rob Halford, I even told the metal god that this track is the new favorite of my kids, and this says a lot. Kids are usually the ones who are able to judge music without any prejudice and simply enjoy it for what it is. But the truth is that hearing Crown of Horns among the other tracks on Invincible Shield has actually opened the song up for me in a completely different light.
Heavy is the crown of horns that rests upon this head.
Invincible Shield is the album of empowerment. Unity, strength, and the will to live and be free are the running themes of this album, and Crown of Horns, being the only song which somewhat differs from the rest of the tracks musically, is in a way a culmination of that theme. A song which sings about each and every one of our internal Invincible Shield, which we can find inside us to give us strength to carry on even under the hardest of circumstances. And you know, I'm a little bit old-fashioned in that way that I still think of albums in terms of 2 different sides of the record or cassette tape. And thus, I believe it is absolutely no coincidence that the gates to the second, more personalized part of Invincible Shield are being opened with this almost power ballad.
Call out to the world tonight to raise your horns up high.
But if that majestic music of Crown of Horns has suddenly made you think about eternal life or made you look for the purpose of your own existence, a skull-crushing riff to As God Is My Witness will quickly wake you up from that trance.
I shall resist when evil comes my way.
With the opening riff to As God Is My Witness, Judas Priest once again take us back to the Painkiller album, as it clearly echoes, at least with its power and energy, with one of my personal favorite songs on that record, Leather Rebel. And once again, on this track, in addition to exquisite job done by Richie Faulkner, we simply have to give praise to this incredible rhythm section crafted by Ian Hill on bass and Scott Travis on drums, which does not only serve as a steady backbone on which Richie and Rob can place layers on top of, but is actually mesmerizing by itself. And I gotta say that if the band decides to play this track live on the future tour, this will definitely be one of the most insane experiences a Judas Priest fan can experience at their favorite band's show.
As God is my witness, I swear they'll be held to pay.
Oh, in addition to all that, the guitar solo on this one is actually one of the craziest ones on Invincible Shield overall, which actually makes me think that together with all the above, this actually does make it one of my personal favorite tracks on this record.
As God is my witness, I will prevail until the end of days.
And then comes Trial by Fire, the second single of Invincible Shield, which many fans actually consider to be the strongest one out of the 4 released by Judas Priest. And here's the thing, during my initial review of Trial by Fire when it first came out, I actually said that I'm really curious to hear how this song will fit among the other tracks on the record. And here's the thing, all 4 of the singles, but especially Crown of Thorns and Trial by Fire, opened up from a slightly new angle for me when I first heard them among the other tracks on this record. But when we talk about this song, in addition to simply sounding different, it also serves another purpose on this tracklist.
Shot down in cold blood, didn't know my name.
One of the most interesting things which Judas Priest have done on the promo cycle of Invincible Shield was to release 4 singles which were wildly different one from another. And in such a way the band was able to resonate with the different layers of the Judas Priest fan base. And as being a band of almost 55 years old, and with by then 18 albums in their catalog, it is absolutely naturally that some of the Judas Priest fans are actually the fans of a specific era of this band's career rather than of their entire catalog. And this is absolutely okay. And it is partially thanks to this that the Judas Priest team were able to keep the interest going, building an enormous hype for Invincible Shield, despite actually announcing it all the way back in October of 2023. But the thing is, despite all of those tracks sounding extremely different one from another, neither of those actually represent Invincible Shield's sound to the fullest, specifically of how diverse this album actually is, with the different parts of this record evoking absolutely different feelings for a listener. And so one of the main purposes of Trial by Fire is to bridge the gap and to open the gates to the lost and the darkest part of Invincible Shield.
Trial by fire.
Escape from Reality is possibly the heaviest and definitely the darkest track on Invincible Shield. And despite it having an undeniably priesty spirit, its sound somewhat echoes that of the other co-founders of the genre, Judas Priest's lifelong friends, Black Sabbath. And once again, because of its production, it sounds very modern-like. Yet if we take a deeper look at its structure and the composition, we'll see that it actually is done in a vein of some of the earliest Judas Priest tracks, and could have easily fitted on some of their late 70s outputs if Andy Sneap would be able to travel in time to produce those.
Agony, escape from reality brings you down.
And maybe that's why Escape from Reality, just like the other songs in this section, might be a grower for some fans. And although I don't think that it will be one of the songs Judas Priest perform live on this tour, it definitely takes a high spot in my list of the best dark and gloomy Judas Priest tracks, and especially thanks to its middle section.
Hallucinations from another worldly place.
Sons of Thunder sounds exactly like you would expect a song titled Sons of Thunder to sound like. It is thunderous. This track is possibly the closest we get to the Angel of Retribution style Judas Priest, with a very straightforward guitar riff and a heavy and power metal crossover chorus, somehow raising the memories of the early 2000 European heavy metal scene when the genre has finally started seeing its revival on the continent.
Let's ride all night, Sons of Thunder.
the track that has grown a lot on me the more I listen to this record. I have to be honest with you, upon my first listen of Invincible Shield, if I would absolutely have had to name a least favorite track, I'd most likely have gone with Sons of Thunder, mostly because of its simplicity structure-wise. But the more I listened to it, the more this shortest song on Invincible Shield just started hitting the spot. And I can't really tell you why. I guess just sometimes the less is more.
Let's ride all night, Sons of Thunder.
And thus we come to the end of the album with the track Giants in the Sky. Most of the time Judas Priest put the strangest or the most experimental song of the album as its outro. And this has been the case all the way since Caviar and Meths on Rock'n'Rolla and up until Firepower's emotional Sea of Red. And this time around, this tradition still holds, as Judas Priest dedicate the last and possibly the most emotional song of the album to all their friends, all those musicians who are no longer with us. The bluesy groove of Giants in the Sky, together with Rob Halford's powerful vocal performance, create a unique atmosphere for this song. Yet the most enchanting moment of it, of course, belongs to the emotional acoustic midsection, during which Rob Halford reaches to the stars with his message of love to all those who forged our favorite genre and now reside in heaven.
If you only knew just how much you mean to me.
And here's the thing, as I mentioned before, the main themes of Invincible Shield are the will to live, strength, and unity. And Giants in the Sky being an ode to all those who helped build in our heavy metal family is definitely the best possible closing track for Invincible Shield, leaving you uplifted and longing for more, and especially with that final scream by Metal God. So what about Invincible Shield? Is it worth your attention? Abso-freaking-lutely yes! Is it one of the best albums Judas Priest ever released? Well, this is where the answer is not as straightforward. Judas Priest is a unique band with not only an extensive, but also a very diverse back catalog. On Unleashed in the East, Judas Priest broke all the rules of metal. On British Steel and Turbo, they conquered the mainstream. And on most of their records, Judas Priest always try to do something unique, something that will make them move forward, even when many did not believe they can do it anymore, like it was on Painkiller. And on Invincible Shield, Judas Priest did exactly the same thing. Invincible Shield is full of power and energy, and yet is very emotional and uplifting at the same time. It is the album which once again shows that the co-founders of heavy metal are not just a legacy band, but they will continue moving forward and bring in something new to their sound until the very end. And the thing is that at this stage in their career, at 55th year of their existence, Judas Priest really do not have to prove anything to anyone anymore. I mean, come on, Judas Priest fans will most likely purchase their new record, even if the band decides to put a disco album out. And yet, on Invincible Shield, Judas Priest do not only not disappoint, but also surprise their fans with the album which somehow was able to capture the essence of the entire Judas Priest legacy, paying homage to the different eras of their sound, and making Invincible Shield the band's gift to all of their loyal fans around the world. And it is absolutely no secret that I am a Judas Priest fan, and that also means that my standards for this band are actually much higher than for most other bands on this planet. And still, what I am about to say is actually a very thought through message. And so to answer the initial question, yes, Invincible Shield is one of the strongest albums this band has ever released in their entire career.
Nothing can stand in our way. Invincible Shield.
But what do you guys think? Please let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, guys, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!